Hey everybody, welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown. My name is Rich Stroffolino, and each time we meet live every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern to discuss the IT news of the week. We're fresh off of the new year, and I'm happy to be back doing some more running down of the news with my good friend, Tom Hollingsworth. Tom, thanks for being on the show as usual.
Thanks, Rich. It's a pleasure to be here for the first show of 2018, although I just finally stopped writing 2016 on all my checks, so yeah.
That's cute. You write checks. That's adorable. I'm just kidding. I have a mortgage. Ha ha ha. Okay, so the new year is always kind of weird for news. We had some items that kind of crawled over from 2017, as it were. I think one of the biggest ones is kind of a resolution, maybe, to this whole Apple battery CPU throttling kerfuffle. If you somehow missed this, one, that's a really big rock you're hiding under. But two, like basically the thing is, Apple found that they had some batteries defective in some iPhone 6 and newer phones that were causing them to not hit peak voltage. This was causing phones to shut off, and they decided to issue a software patch that would slightly, I don't want to mitigate it. It would throttle CPU performance in high usage cases, so this wouldn't happen. So your phone wouldn't shut off, but you would lose some performance on the high end. Basically, turns out this really makes people mad when you don't tell them. So they issued a formal apology. They've reduced the price of a battery replacement from $79 to $29, and basically doing battery replacements, no questions asked. I guess before, if a Apple tech detected that you had an over 80% battery, they just tell you no, which if they want to give you money, I don't see why they would turn it down. But Tom, how does this, in terms of a corporate response, how does this fall in the corporate milieu?
Well, actually what I've heard so far is that the response, the apology, and we're going to do better and show you more has actually made people happy. I mean, yeah, it's a total mea culpa. We screwed up. We did something trying to make your life easier, and you caught us because you're smart, and now we have to apologize for it. I tweeted something to the effect of, I hope this doesn't completely destroy a $1 trillion company and ruin their fate. And even though I ended it with a /S for obvious sarcasm, people were still taking it seriously. But the question that I have for everybody out there that is completely flipped out by this and is ready to pitch their new iPhone 10 into the garbage bin, remember that this is only for iPhone 6 and higher. If you have an iPhone 5S or lower, you get the other side of the bug, which is we're not going to throttle your CPU, but your battery goes from 31% to 1% like that. Because, yeah, this is the flip side. You can either have slow performance and battery life, or you can have no battery life and full performance as soon as it runs out immediately. So pick your poison. And for those of you who are complaining that batteries should behave better than this, that long ago that laptop manufacturers only warranted their batteries for a year, and that's why Duracell batteries have expiration dates, because chemically they do expire.
Yeah, I mean, it does kind of, it also illustrates that lithium ion is like kind of not the best. I mean, it's the best battery technology that we have, but it's also not good for a lot of applications. It's like, there's literally like $1 trillion in funding for anyone that has like a remotely viable battery technology. The one thing that really surprised me about Apple's response is that they're actually adding some transparency features into the OS in a forthcoming software update that'll actually tell you, like, give you like more indications into battery health, send you recommendations, let you know when they've actually started throttling your CPU if this becomes a problem. Now, if you're cynical, you'd also say, well, this does also prompt you then to go in and pay for a battery replacement that I'm sure Apple is still making money on because they're really good at doing that. But it's more transparency than you usually get from the company. I'm a little disappointed though that we didn't get like an Antenna Gate press conference out of it where, Johnny Ive comes up and just tells everybody, or Phil Schiller would probably come up, right? Would come up and say, you're charging it wrong. I would have loved that. If you haven't seen it, make sure you YouTube the Antenna Gate press conference to see a pissed off Steve Jobs. Like, fine, you want a bumper, you stupid peons, here you go. It's an amazing piece of corporate marketing that only Apple could pull off. So kudos to them for not being completely pissy about this.
Yeah.
In other news, we had some interesting. It's not quite a release, but it's a little more information about an upcoming Intel product. It's the Intel Core i7-8809G. This was the one that we heard an initial press release about. It's cats and dogs sleeping together, Tom. It's an Intel CPU with integrated, or I'm sorry, with discrete AMD graphics on the same chip. It's not integrated into the CPU package itself, but it's on the same die. It's a really weird looking beast. And if it's anything like the renders, it's going to be a fugly CPU.
Well, I mean, Intel really has kind of backed themselves into a corner. Iris is good, but not great. And let's face it, Intel's strength is not making graphics chips. And AMD's strength probably isn't making discrete CPU cores, although that's a completely different barrel of monkeys. No, the problem is that they're having to go up against NVIDIA, and NVIDIA is killing them for certain applications. Although I did hear rumors that NVIDIA's new EULA disallows the use of their cards in data center applications. So that could be a rather entertaining switch. Now, is this going to mean the end for discrete AMD GPUs that are not on the die? No. Is this going to mean that Intel's going to stop offering Iris graphics? No. Is this aimed at a very specific market segment of people that were probably going to not buy either of these products unless they were bundled together? Yes.
Well, it is really interesting, right? Because Intel is trying to have it both ways, right? They want the power of AMD, this AMD graphics. They're putting the latest Vega GPU in there, but it's really interesting because one, they're saying this is not a new product line. This is a one-off thing. This is literally just going to be a one-time product we might do in the future, but this is not indicative of going to be successive generations of this. The second thing, though, is Intel is not putting their best into this product right now. It's going to be, from all accounts, running on the older Kaby Lake architecture, not the new Coffee Lake architecture. It's going to be limited 4 cores, 8 threads. And I'm not 100% what the reason is. And it's also running, I think the base frequency is 3.1 gigahertz, which, compared to other 8th generation Intel CPUs is fairly, is a little on the slow side.
It's probably, they have a whole bunch of stock of these Kaby Lake processors that they need to get rid of. And that's why they're going to do a one-off. And if it sells like gangbusters, if the gamers and the VR people buy it up, although I don't think it'll run VR, then yeah, they'll make more. But right now, this is simply just to consume inventory and get it out the door.
Well, and the most interesting part to me is that they're fitting it all into a 100-watt thermal envelope, or an ideally 100. They phrase it very specifically so that it's probably not going to hit exactly 100 watts, but it's going to be around there. Which for CPU, GPU, an Intel CPU usually mid-range one runs high end like 45 to 60 watts. So that's a pretty tight thermal envelope. It does make me wonder if by specifying being that specific with that kind of heat and power. Is this like targeted? You mentioned maybe VR. That's probably too high of a wattage to put into a standalone headset, which is kind of the VR dream. But I'm wondering if this is more for like a company mandated product category, like an Ultrabook or back in the day Ultra Mobile PC, which is my favorite thing to make fun of, to think of how terrible an idea it was. But for me. One, the other obvious thing is this going to be in a future Apple product? Because it seems like maybe you put this in a Mac Mini, maybe you put this, in a consumer iMac, where all of a sudden you have one chip, takes up very little room on a PCB, relatively modest power requirements. Seems like something where you want thin, light power, a good mix of that. That's kind of Apple's bread and butter.
Yeah, and you know what it could be? It could be kind of a sidecar product to something that they're already developing for Apple to go in other PCs, like mini bare bones PCs, home theater type stuff. Although I think the wattage is way too high for home theater.
It's a little on the high side.
Yeah, but people, if we've already seen that with the new iMac Pro, it's running a custom Intel chip. It's obviously one you can buy, but it's not something that you would think to buy off the shelf. So maybe they've already developed this for the, I'm going to get the fanboys jumping at me here, the next Mac Mini. And this is just them trying to offer that for sale to other people who want to try to emulate that kind of form factor.
All right. In other news, we have some Microsoft acquisition news to start off the year. They've acquired Avere Systems. If you're curious about what Avere does, we have some videos up for them at techfieldday.com, which you might want to check out. But very interesting. They're kind of into very much in the hybrid cloud storage space. So they offered some caching and file system products that basically would let you, hey, you have your cloud compute and you can, have some local storage, vice versa. They actually did some really interesting things with having a very versatile hybrid cloud layout, really letting you pull in either cloud storage, cloud processing, and mix it in with on-prem fairly seamlessly. But now Microsoft's buying that in, and they went and said that they're going to full-on integrate this very heavily into Azure. So is this just Microsoft maturing their hybrid cloud offering? That's the new hotness. It kind of makes sense.
Yeah, this is totally about trying to get people to move from on-premises workloads into Azure. It's every acquisition, and I'll make a bold statement here since it's January the 3rd. Every acquisition that we're going to see from companies like Microsoft going forward is going to be about integrating with Azure. They're not going to buy companies just for the sake of saying, oh, hey, they have an Office suite thing that I like, or hey, that's a pretty slick presentation program that you developed there. No, this is all about making people consume more Azure. That's their way forward. Satya Nadella is basically staking the future of the company on their cloud, and the man has hit a home run so far with everything he's done. I would not bet against him.
This does beg the question, though, because Avere does do quite a bit of hardware sales in terms of hardware caching appliances that kind of sit at your edge. Do you think Microsoft is going to get into reselling that, or is this purely just going to be a software?
This is a software play. I imagine that the hardware supplies, what they'll do is they'll just stop making them. They'll sell what they've got. They'll support what they've got, because that's the other thing Microsoft doesn't want. It's not about selling hardware. Microsoft didn't want to sell hardware. The Surface Book wouldn't exist. Microsoft doesn't want to support hardware. So hardware support is hard enough for the Windows developers. Can you imagine trying to support it with end users? Well, it's got Microsoft on the box. It obviously needs to work with Windows. I can hear the sighing from Redmond now.
Do you think they'll put out a spec, though, for, hey, to support Azure Edge, blah, 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 you need to have this, 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 and this?
Yeah, I could totally see it.
So buy into it?
Yeah, roll your own, put our software on it, include it as part of your enterprise licensing agreement, and it's a cloud on-ramp kind of thing.
Okay. I mean, makes perfect sense. Sad to see Avere go. I thought pretty cool technology package there go, but they live on with Azure. And finally, kind of for our big story here, we had some reports from The Information that Amazon and Salesforce are making substantial investments to move away from Oracle. Not any big surprise. I don't think anyone's happy to be paying Oracle bags and bags of cash. But according to the report, Salesforce is developing its own database to replace Oracle. Amazon's looking to move to NoSQL. Is this almost shouldn't this be the story for every giant, hyperscale tech company, that roll your own generally is going to be more efficient once you get past that initial technology investment, right? I mean, it just makes sense in the long haul.
Yeah, if you've got an army of developers sitting around doing nothing that can write and support your own database package or something that's open source off the shelf that you can then pull in and customize, yeah, do that. I mean, yeah, Larry Ellison was out there blowing the biggest tuba in the world, telling the entire world that Amazon still bought Oracle. I'm like, yeah, compared to what they're offering, I'm pretty sure that amount is kind of like this, because, hey, Apple pays Samsung to put chips in iPhones too. It doesn't mean that Apple makes less money than Samsung. No, this is a counter to getting rid of all those Oracle licensing costs, realistically speaking, which is still a very small part of the bottom line of AWS and Salesforce. But hey, every little bit helps whenever you have to pay for opening a new distribution center somewhere in the middle of North Dakota.
Does this pave the way then for other companies to ditch Oracle, or again, is this everyone should already be thinking about doing this, even if they're not doing this?
No, the companies that can ditch Oracle already have those plans on the roadmap. Okay. Because remember, even for a company like Amazon, which is freewheeling and happy and capable of doing this, this is going to be a seismic, titanic blast in the middle of Amazon. There's going to be a lot of crap that gets broken over the next 9-10 months as they move off of this thing. Anyone out there who's ever done any kind of database migration will tell you that's the reason why database admins probably should shave their heads. It's just to keep them from pulling their hair out. And so the smaller companies who don't have the expertise to do this, they're not going to do that. The only time that that's going to happen is when Larry Ellison needs a second secret villain island volcano layer, and he raises the prices on the licenses again. or he wants to sell more cloud and then bundles everybody into Oracle Cloud, that's when people are basically going to be forced to move off of it.
Yeah, I mean, well, Oracle is a cloud company. I mean, as Larry is want to tell you, so they're pretty much the biggest public cloud company ever, at least according to Larry Ellison's smoke that is being blown in an undetermined location.
And if you believe that, I got a bridge that I'll sell you awful cheap in New York, and it runs Oracle too.
Ooh, very Oracle Cloud. Yes, very nice. So finally, our big story of the day. This has kind of been breaking over the last 2 days or so, though brewing, it seems like, for quite a while. Tom, how's your new year been so far? Like,
well,
good, right?
I would say it's probably been okay, but I'm sure it's better than at least a couple of people's.
Yeah, it seems like Intel has a thing for big flaws in their CPU architectures coming out in the middle of winter. Last year, we had all the Atom CPUs that were bricking all sorts of devices, causing headaches for Cisco, among others. But that's probably going to seem like halcyon days after what they're going to be dealing with here. It's been revealed, the Register reported on this. I saw this on a couple of Linux dev blogs and stuff like that, and some Reddit threads. But basically, there is a fundamental flaw in the way, in the kernel memory of Intel CPUs across pretty much the entire line. The issue comes with Intel's speculative execution. This is where it kind of, Intel, to dumb it down in the dumbest of terms, Intel is trying to figure out, is pulling in things prematurely based on what it thinks you're going to be using for processing purposes, in the microsecond before or whatever like that. The issue becomes they're not making a clear distinction. In some cases, I'm not sure if this is in all cases or just in a subset of them, between OS, kernel, and user space applications. And what this can allow is and as a result, basically, you can get read access between VMs in certain situations. It's an exploit that pretty much breaks down the fundamental security of virtualization. It's kind of a big deal. This kind of reminds me of a bug that came out that was at the Pwn to Own conference or event or whatever last year, where there was a full VM escape from VMware. The problem is with that VMware escape that was shown off, they could patch that the next day or whatever. They just had to throw developer resources on it, and it was fixed and it was fine. The problem here is that one, Linux devs are scrambling to implement changes to the virtual memory system in the Linux kernel, and Windows is doing the same thing just behind the scenes. The problem is those fixes are having major impacts on performance. We're seeing anywhere from 5 to 30% depending on the application and the specific Intel CPU. And what makes it worse is that the older CPUs seem to be having the biggest problems, meaning that if you were already kind of, okay, maybe we're at capacity in terms of what our processors can handle, all of a sudden now you're under capacity if you roll out this update. So it really puts organizations between, I mean, at least to me, a rock and a hard place. Do you risk gross negligence in security and not update, or do you possibly break SLAs or not being able to meet application needs by rolling out this update and suffering these pretty substantial performance impacts? Tom, I'm just kind of wondering, how do you think this is all going to shake out, and what do you think of? I mean, we haven't even heard from Intel really yet. I mean, there's supposedly news coming. I mean, What are your thoughts?
The news is due today, supposedly. There's still a bunch of NDAs. I mean, the funny thing is that this came out like yesterday is when I first saw it. But if you trace it back, people have known about this since mid-December. They've been checking in kernel patches left and right. Funny enough, the comments in most of those kernel patches are obfuscated. Why? Because there's a huge NDA that's around this. There's no CVEs. Supposedly, the Intel CEO sold a ton of stock first week of December. And someone that posted it was like, yeah, I wonder why. To give you an idea of how irritating this bug is, the proposed kernel patch was the forcefully unmap complete kernel with interrupt trampolines. And if you want to figure out the acronym for that one, I can't pronounce it on YouTube, but let's just say some people are really mad. Intel's going to get a real big black eye for this. Now, granted, the 14 people who run AMD processors over in the corner are cackling with glee. Thanks for that image, hacks for pancakes. But the problem is that this is an install base that's enormous. I mean, every machine in my house runs some sort of an Intel processor, and if it doesn't, I mean, it's some off-brand thing. I've even heard that this could possibly impact their ARM chipsets. What am I going to do?
Wow.
Well, I can either not patch it, which maybe is going to be my option here because I don't really have to worry about VM escapes on my desktop. It doesn't do a whole lot. But if you're a cloud provider, you don't have an option. You have to patch this. And what are you going to do? Tell your customers, oops, sorry, we bet big on that one 4 years ago and we took a bath on it. Intel, when you look at Apple saying, I'm sorry, we screwed up, here's how we're going to fix it. Intel can't do that. Intel can't offer cheap battery replacements and our sincerest apologies for screwing this up. You guys took a shortcut years ago to make things run faster, and the butcher's bill came due, and what are you going to do? Nothing. You're going to eat your giant, terrible sandwich of crap, and you are going to fix this problem going forward, and we're right back to the x86 wars. Because if AMD's only advantage over or only disadvantage over you is a single-threaded processor utilization or their performance was crap, I mean, you just leveled your own playing field, guys.
Yeah, well, and even if even if they refine some of the kernel updates that they're doing, and it only impacts 5%, which is still ridiculous. Again, that completely levels the playing field, and like you said, yeah, it's a huge corporate black eye. I mean, this is also, it's not just sloppy architecture on Intel's part. It also is one of the impacts of having a completely uncompetitive server CPU landscape where everyone is running. You joke about the 14 people running AMD. I think that's probably an exaggeration. I literally don't even know why, up until the whatever the Epic or whatever they want to call it, whatever stupid name. I hate all of AMD's naming conventions for this next generation. It's a side point. Anyway, basically up until this point, it's been completely uncompetitive, and I don't know why you would run an AMD server, for a CPU for a server. I'm sure there are reasons. Don't write me. But yeah, it's baffling, or it's not baffling. It's a sad consequence of having absolutely no competition for over a decade in the CPU market.
Yeah.
So, I mean, other than a bunch of class action lawsuits, I guess can Intel do anything to fix? I mean, not to fix this, but to help make it less painful for a lot of organizations. Obviously, I mean, the problem with this is, it's like I can't even say, oh, only the big guys are impacted. The mom and pop shops probably aren't, because no, I mean, if you're anywhere from AWS, to you're a company like to Scale Computing, you're just someone that's running, virtualization, just whatever you're running, just vCenter or something like that. It affects everybody equally in terms of legal liability if you don't patch it. Yeah,
and the worst part is for those smaller companies like the Scale Computings of the world, the Nutanixes of the world, the Pure Storages of the world that rely on x86 processors, they're going to release a patch. It's going to fix this. Everything's going to slow down. Here come the phone calls. Your box is crap. I hate you. I want to move. I'm going to your competitor. What are you going to do? The only thing you can do is blame Intel. Sorry, Intel screwed up, and we're not responsible for it. We apologize. So Intel's not just going to get backlash from their customers. They're going to get backlash from their partners. There's a tidal wave of bad karma that's headed their way.
Yeah, and I don't. There really doesn't seem to be any way out of it. It just seems like for whatever reason, Intel's just having a really hard time executing. I mean, but you can't even say it's this year or the last year. I mean, clearly this has been going on. This has been an issue for years. That's the other thing that really concerns me is have theoretically, you have some very sophisticated actors could have theoretically known about this for quite some time.
Yeah, and let this be a lesson to any of you guys out there that are developers or wanting to become developers. Every dirty little hack that you do to increase performance or try to cheat the system is going to come due sooner or later. Somebody's going to find it, and most of the time that people find it, they will be armed with pitchforks and torches, and they will have your address. So you better be ready.
The one thing, you mentioned that probably most consumers probably won't need to patch necessarily just because they're not running virtualized workloads. I am actually thinking, though, that Windows 10s that just came out does do some process isolation as part of their whole security package. So I'm wondering if that's going to be particularly acute for the. I mean, that's a small subset of consumers, but still, when your whole pitch is that, hey, everything's isolated and nothing can talk to something, and so it's going to alleviate a lot of security concerns. All of a sudden, that breaks if you lose VM containment.
Yeah, exactly. This is going to have to be, a lot of damage control from the Microsoft side and the rest of the operating system groups to figure out if that's even viable anymore.
Well, let's hope they get so much goodwill from this Radeon integrated Intel processor that everyone forgets this horrific bug that seems to screw everybody equally. I mean, that's the only good thing, right? It screws everybody equally.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, Tom. Well, thank you so much. This was a really fun rundown. We'll be back next Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern live here on the Ewing Tubes, and then we'll have a post up later on for you to enjoy at a later date. We'll have more updates as I'm sure the lawsuits and implications from this Intel flaw continue to be realized. Maybe there is going to be some way to patch the memory subsystem that won't be quite as bad, but we'll see. I'm skeptical. All right, Tom. So if anyone wants to follow you and find out where they can find your snark-marked tweets, where can they find that?
Well, Twitter is the best place to find me for real-time updates. Networking Nerd is my Twitter handle. Blog is networkingnerd.net.
All right, and you can find my writing at gestaltit.com and me on Twitter at Mr. Anthropology, Mr. Anthropology. Until next time, here's wishing you and yours to have a super sparkly day.